Welcome back to Final Weapon, everyone, and Square Enix this week announced a brand new Final Fantasy game, but it probably was not what anyone in the world expected, and that is Dissidia Duellum. We have a brand new entry in the Dissidia series for the first time in quite a while, and there's just a lot to talk about today, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, it's just been so long since we've had a Dissidia game. NT came out in 2018, and that was 7 years ago, guys. It's about time we've gotten a new Dissidia. This wasn't really quite what anyone expected, I don't believe. Like, it's not what I expected when they made the announcement for the announcement. But how do you really feel about the continuation of Dissidia in almost a decade, just jumping straight into what's most assuredly a gacha game?
I mean, honestly, I'm kind of just sitting here thinking about the fact that the last time we had a new Dissidia game was before they even showed the new trailer for Final Fantasy VII Remake. So it's been a long time. But I mean, honestly, my thoughts are I definitely, being honest, came away from the announcement pretty disappointed. But I do think that there are some bright spots, and I can definitely kind of pinpoint and try to understand why Square Enix went this direction. And I think a lot of it has to do with their audience and trying to make that bigger and capture new markets.
I'm inclined to agree. There's a lot of, I'd almost say Dissidia has become the poster child of Square Enix spin-offs that's become a trend-chasing thing. Like, we've got new IPs like Foam Stars that are trying to be this weird trend-chasey thing, but I feel like Dissidia, in terms of especially Final Fantasy, because NT was like this weird, almost like esportsy adaptation of arcade, and this just feels like another gimmick, because Opera Omnia tried with its turn-based version of the Bravery battle system, and it got many years of excellent fan service content, but at the end of the day, what the fan base really craves, I feel, this is what I know I want too. I want like an actual continuation of Dissidia from just evolving what Duodissum left off in 2011.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I think a lot of people point to the trend chasing and just kind of what Square Enix has done in recent years to try to attack the different markets it has. And I think, you point a lot to Final Fantasy of why isn't the series exceptionally growing the way that many other are right now. And people can tell you one thing or the other, but personally, I do believe it boils down to just the average player and who is actually playing the Final Fantasy games. And when I say that, I mean by age. And generally, most people playing Final Fantasy are in the older side. And when I say that, in the 20s and 30s, they're having a harder time capturing younger audiences. And when you look at other series like Persona, etc., on the Japanese side of things, you can obviously see, if you're online, how big of an influence that has had on younger generations. And so I'm definitely really hopeful, at least, that this is a decision from Square that is purposely trying to attack that market, and maybe that might open doors for people to get interested in Final Fantasy.
And I believe that's really what I want to get out of this game. We'll get a little more into some of the things that we like about this here in a minute, but ultimately this is something that I think that is trying to capture a wider market. It's a little hard for me to completely buy that in some ways, just because I feel like we don't know enough about the game yet. We've only seen pretty much a minute of footage, tops, and that's including just them standing there and talking. So I'm holding my breath a little bit on it capturing like a wider audience, because I just don't know what's there. But you can see that's the direction that they're steering, because I feel like this is making a much bigger concerted effort to be trendy and to capture like an audience. We have a bit of that more softer looking anime art style that has been like, I wouldn't say it's like something similar to Genshin Impact or anything, but a lot of mobile games have been leaning more towards having this kind of softer anime style, and even Zelda has that these days.
Which is crazy. Like, if you were a fan of that, anime and that kind of style in even the 2010s, and especially before that, it was like forbidden. And it's very crazy to me that like now in 2020 and, from 2020, basically the pandemic onwards, it's been just the wave and it has been unanimously successful for every company that's tried it.
And I'm still concerned that this isn't the push they need for Dissidia to really capture another market, but we're not really getting enough games released on, a small enough time scale to really see what works. Because there's a part of me that, is a fan of Dissidia Duodecim especially. I want to just sit here and say if they just stuck with that, they would still have a fan base. But I think some of the more recent struggles of Final Fantasy is that it hasn't been able to break out of its core fan bases, for better and for worse.
Yeah.
And if they're wanting to make, games like FF16 and to a lesser extent FF7 Rebirth, they can't really sustainably do that,
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, we've seen that continuously, time and time again, Square Enix has said that they're disappointed with sales, which, for the record, they did not say about Rebirth, so let's not get into that weed fest right now. But at the end of the day, the company has set very lofty expectations for many of its games, and even the big heavy hitters just aren't selling comparatively to other big RPG giants in the genre. But beyond that, sales talk is sales talk. We got to talk about Dissidia Duellum. So, initial thoughts aside, this is like Tetsuya Nomura's 5th attempt to try to bring Versus 13 back, and I love it. I'm sorry.
It definitely has a different vibe, but at this point, we know the gun's there. We see the smoke. We know the gun's there. He's obsessed with this aesthetic, and I'm all here for it. Wouldn't it be like the funniest thing when Noctis gets added as a ghost in the game that he's just wearing his normal clothes?
Right.
That's what they need to do. He just comes as is.
No, he probably will. I mean, at this point, Nomura just needs to make Versus 13, but like it's never gonna happen. I'm not holding out hope, but I really do like the aesthetic. I think it's awesome. I love seeing the different Final Fantasy characters in, these casual outfits that are more akin to the real world. And at least from what we've seen, it seems like that they're gonna kind of allow you to see different areas of Tokyo, which I think that's really cool and could be super neat to do with all the different characters they've shown so far.
And I completely dig the aesthetic. It's a nice city vibe, and even if you look at some other successful RPGs like Persona 5 and SMT in general uses Tokyo, whether it be post-apocalyptic or whatever, and Square's The World Ends With You, which I also adore that series, and I know you also love those games too.
Yeah, go play them.
Like, it's just so awesome to be in a cityscape like that, because you don't get to see such a vibrant, lively city like that in most Western games, especially presented in that anime aesthetic. And it's honestly nice to see Final Fantasy dip its toes a little more into that. We rarely get to see Final Fantasy have this bit of a softer look to it. Even in its more stylized iterations, it's usually not quite like this. Even World of Final Fantasy doesn't quite just capture like almost the saccharine feel the art has. Like, it's just like the way it's colored and everything, the outfits, and it just seems like the story might not even have some of the darker tones of Duodecim. Just from our first impressions.
My guess would be that this is going to be on the lighter side of things, and I agree with you. I dig it for sure. I definitely think that this is something, exciting for Square. Obviously, like you said, most Final Fantasy games nowadays, really since, entries ago at this point, but have continued to kind of chase for that realism side of things with, combining a unique art style with realism. So I'm definitely in favor of kind of seeing the art direction for this so far. But, kind of moving about the developers, you did a lot of research on the development team. So, would you be willing to give us kind of an overview of this team and what they've worked on previously?
Yeah, sure thing. Well, first things first, the developers, they showed it in the trailer, I believe, like a quick flash alongside the Square Enix logo and stuff. If not, you can see it all on the teaser website for Duellum. But the developer is a company called NHN Play Art, and they're highly associated with Line Corporation, you know, the Japanese messaging app, and they have like games and stuff. And they've developed, you've probably know of a couple of these things, but a lot of them are, you know, more so for the Japanese casual market. So like their biggest thing is the Disney Tsum Tsum like puzzle game.
Oh yeah.
They've also done like the Yokai Watch puzzle game, and they're running these other games called Compass, which seem to be an original IP from what I understand. But throughout their website, they really pride themselves on working with large IP holders. And since it seems like they've satisfactorily worked with Disney, I guess in an ironic sense, seems like a decent choice for Square. But
Yeah.
they've worked on other stuff. There's also, they did that Dragon Quest like Keshi Keshi phone puzzle game that they announced when they announced the Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D remake. And also they worked on Atelier Online and just some other stuff beyond that. It's just more line games and some like sports stuff. So nothing quite on the level of Final Fantasy in my opinion, especially in terms of, I'd say, tone or character or in general like lore type things. It doesn't seem they've really ever dove into something like that. But as we know with all these Square ventures, like Nomura is the creative director on this, so it's Square working very closely with them to make this. But as far as a mobile developer goes, they seem competent. They seem well vetted, I suppose, even though it seems, just casually looking at it, off the top of my head, the only like RPG series I recognize, because I don't know some of these Japanese ones that they've displayed here, is Atelier Online, but I'm also not sure if that functions more like an MMO. But I guess at least they've worked with something that's in the ballpark of what Dissidia is.
Yeah, no, and speaking of kind of the developer, I think it's important to transition here and kind of talk about our main two negatives that we took away from this game. And that's number one, it being a mobile game. And you know, I get it. There's a lot of people that love mobile games. I mean, it's the biggest market. Obviously, it's a very important market. But I think for Final Fantasy fans, it's definitely kind of an eye roll moment, just because people want to play these games on PC, on consoles, on their Switch 2, on their TV. They really don't want to pull around on a mobile game that doesn't, I guess, feel as premium as something on a console or PC might. And I'll be honest, you know, my first takeaway from watching the trailer was, wow, I am really, really surprised that this game made it into the Square Enix Reboots and Reawakens plan.
Honestly, because that, it's essentially common knowledge at this point if you are at least elbow deep into what's going on with Square in the modern age. But so one of my biggest worries when that was, you know, came to like public knowledge, this restructuring and cancellation of a bunch of stuff, my first thoughts were, oh man, they canceled a Dissidia game more than likely. And when they said that, because when they announced the announcement of Duellum before we even had the name, it was like, oh, a new Dissidia project, and I was like, oh wow, until I saw the words mobile. And I enjoy my odd mobile game. I'm sure everyone does. You have at least one or two you probably waste your time on from, like, on occasion. But it's so disappointing where it just seems like anything that seems like a promising spin-off is just kind of thrown onto phones.
Yeah. It's definitely a pattern at this point. I mean, we saw it with Nier Reincarnation, which is basically Nier 3, by the way. Completely shut down now, inaccessible. Kingdom Hearts has gotten, you know, critical stories on mobile, inaccessible. It's definitely a choice. And again, I think it ties back to what we were talking about earlier. Square thinks that this is a market that has younger players and just a wider audience than is available on consoles and PCs that they can capture. But it's like, man, why can't we get like an actual Dissidia game on console, you know?
And if there's one thing that everyone needs to keep in mind about this modern era of streaming, microtransactions, and all of that, is that it's nowhere of a sustainable model near as much as hard sales. There were times like early into, DLC history that, that was making bank, but really the main things that drive like the profits of the major gaming companies is subscriptions like PlayStation Plus. That's what keeps Sony afloat at the end of the day. That's what makes them go into the green. And DLC sales have fallen off a lot in recent years, especially as games get more expensive or kind of get more lukewarm reception. Because, like, even honestly, after playing FF16's DLC, while I do like playing more FF16, I don't think it was worth $30.
No, it was alright. It was
And
alright.
I can't recommend anyone ever pay that full price of $30. I said as much when we only got part 1 of the DLC in my Echoes of the Fallen review.
Yeah. And it was, don't want to get on a tangent, but that was a really interesting release because, like, the part 1 had, like, a really incredible boss fight at the end that was actually challenging, except it was very, minimal story. It was just kind of this dungeon. And then part 2 was hyped up to be, it was like, wow, like, this is this whole new area. And I really enjoyed, the Leviathan fight and everything. But I was like, man, I wanted more story for Jill. But beyond the point, do you think we're going to see a new Dissidia game on console at some point? Because in my opinion, and I really hate saying this, I do think that there's a lot riding on this entry.
I do too, and picking up a little from what we were just talking about, I get that Square, any company wants to permeate the general mass market. But you look at things like even companies like Disney in recent years have received a lot of flack. Like, they still do release some creatively great things. However, it's not near as much, and a lot of it you can tell is sanded down because they're trying to mass appeal. That's also a problem with things like people feel the same way about Last of Us these days, So, I don't think Final Fantasy's ever going to really have its identity sanded down like that, but just it releasing as a mobile game after all these years, beyond just being a disappointment, I don't think is going to really give them the results they want. Because look at Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. That game, I could probably go check, but it hit 7 million downloads pretty fast. That's as much as FF7 Remake sold before Intermission and Intergrade, and, we haven't even gotten the Switch 2 release or anything of that yet. And it's probably sitting well over 10 million downloads. But Game Pass...
Oh, well over, yeah.
But things like Game Pass have also taught us that just because, like, a game is downloaded and tried, you're not going to make money or even necessarily capture a market.
Yep.
And that's just a big gamble that ultimately the die is cast, and that die is this game.
Yeah.
And let's just hope Square placed their bets correctly.
For sure. And it's interesting because it's like, I do think, at some point we will make a video on what a console Dissidia could have been, but tying it back to the 2011 release and enhancing that, bringing that forward, and really embracing what made the original few games so great, I think could have even made a mark in the competitive scene if they did it right? And so I definitely think that there was more opportunity there, but I don't want to dismiss this as an inherently bad thing like some people online are, because I understand Square's point of view on this, and I do think at the very least there is potential if there's enough content at launch. So our other big thing of negative to move on to is kind of the design of the game with the boss rush aspect. So essentially this game operates as a 3v3 where two teams are fighting against a boss, and the team that clears the boss first wins.
I'm also just a little, I guess admittedly, it's only been half of the series if you look at the grand scheme of things. That's been weird, atypical spin-off things. But I guess I'm just kind of sick of all these extra weird things, because Dissidia started as a one-on-one this Final Fantasy character fights this Final Fantasy character.
Yep.
And we have fighting games that are honestly getting pretty big these days. I mean, look at something like Dragon Ball FighterZ. That game exploded to heights that I'm not even sure Guilty Gear reached.
No. And Guilty Gear's another one. I mean, Guilty Gear selling as many copies as it has is incredible. And I mean, they just announced that new Avatar fighting game this past week that everyone's excited for. I mean, they're bigger than ever. Evo every single year is bigger than the last year. So it's kind of mind-numbing at this point that they can't just go back to that 1v1 action, because that's what, like, again, that's what fans want. And you have to think through that lens. But I also, through that lens, believe that new fans would be intrigued by saying, oh, it's so-and-so. Oh, it's Sephiroth. Oh my gosh, let me try that game. But again, we're not going to talk about what ifs. But I am going to say, like, what even is Dissidia at this point? I feel like it's basically Square just saying, hey, you know what? We have more Final Fantasy characters than just one entry entertaining each other. It's Dissidia. You know? I don't know. I just... To me, this game being called Dissidia is interesting. And I get it, obviously, Nomura in every single Dissidia game has been critical. One of the biggest, masterminds behind the series. But it's like, man, I just don't even know what we're doing at this point.
I get on some level this is, like great, brilliant creatives working within boxes and confines that companies that mostly just want to make money, if not only want to make money, are setting upon them. But I just wish there's more consistency in Dissidia's, like, battles or fighting than just there's bravery. Because that's pretty much just been it. You see more consistency in the mainline Final Fantasy series in terms of battle systems. 16 is closer to, like, in terms of goals, in terms of your actual goal of a fight beyond just killing a monster, like, Dissidia has just gone off the walls. Because we already had, like, that team aspect, which it made sense in arcade and NT. It just felt tacked on. NT was a tacked on story composed out of a game that was tacked together off of another game. And it's just a good question, because really all I can say is Dissidia is, I can't even say it's when Final Fantasy characters crossover, because that's been like every Final Fantasy mobile game pretty much.
I know.
And then there's things like World of Final Fantasy. Look, Final Fantasy characters are in more crossovers than they are their own games. And so it really is just when Final Fantasy characters are isekai'd, and we have something called bravery as part of the battle system. That's a Dissidia.
I guess. But I think, to be fair on the boss stuff, we really just don't have enough info on the game right now. There's going to be a closed beta test that's coming up, and I feel like we'll probably get a more clear picture after that takes place. But we've kind of just have one trailer and a couple screen grabs to go off of kind of how this is going to play. But Square has communicated that this is a 3v3 boss kind of game, so it's definitely not what you would think of when you think of Dissidia.
And because it's going more so off of the idea of Dissidia that I guess we can point our fingers at arcade for starting, since NT is just, an adaptation of that pretty much.
Right.
Which involves like but that was at least still like a party of 3 people fighting against a party of 3 people. That was at least the idea with those games. And with NT, when you included boss fights, it was your party fighting the boss. So all of that makes sense. And it makes a level of sense in this game if you were just fighting some monsters, because you even fight the mannequins and stuff in Duodecim and Original. But this is just fighting monsters, and that's it. It's like a competitive thing. And the story that we've gotten so far is that they're transported to the real world, and these Final Fantasy characters are actually trying to blend into modern-day Tokyo society. And they're called ghosts because it just seems like random people in armor or with magical weapons just appear and defeat these monsters that just appear. So that's like the general concept, which I really like. But we don't have enough info about the battle system for me to piece any of that together in any meaningful way. So is it just pushing monsters back? Are we... So then it dives even further. We've seen a lot of people already. Tell me you haven't just hopped on Twitter during the buzz about this game and people are like, did they cancel Kingdom Hearts Missing Link and build this game on top of it?
That rumor is so crazy. I'm so sorry. Like, if you actually think that this is Missing Link, like, I don't even know, I don't even know what to tell you.
And to like shoot that down more solidly, because otherwise I'd get really condescending really fast if you believe that. Like, there's already been like beta testers of Missing Link. They've come out and said that, judging from what very little footage we have of Duellum so far, that gameplay-wise it appears nothing like Missing. So there's that. But the comparison is still interesting to me, because how are we going to be interfacing with these battles? Because they kind of flaunt simplicity of the battles on the teaser site. So will it just be like a basic home screen? They've shown you can like collect Final Fantasy music albums and just play Final Fantasy music like an MP3 player in the game and stuff. So like that's a collectible, and you can kind of divulge of them having these cards done by multiple artists. That's going to be the gacha element you're going to pull for these. So maybe they have just a simple screen where it's just like, here's the quest button, you queue up when you select the quest, almost like the co-op missions in Ever Crisis and other gacha games, you know? It may work like that, which I'm kind of down for, but something like Missing Link was also a Pokemon Go-esque GPS game, and a weird part of me almost wonders, just purely because of the story about them appearing in the real world, I'm wondering if this is going to be like a weird AR/GPS game. And I'm wondering if Missing...
I don't know, man.
What if Missing Link bit the dust because this came together on schedule while Missing Link wasn't?
I don't think this is going to have any GPS
I wouldn't go that
elements.
far. I hope it doesn't. But that's just like the weird feeling I got from the story and the competing against another team.
Yeah.
But it more than likely, I'll say this, because we've seen, like I said, literal seconds of gameplay. You can swipe up on ability cards, you can activate some bravery burst thing, and you fight monsters. So that's what it is. That's all we could really see.
It's a game. But I want to move us into the positives, because I think we both did take away some stuff that's positive. We touched on it earlier, the potential for a brand new player base. I think it's great that they're jumping out of the gate with, Cloud's available. They've teased that Clive's coming in. Rinoa, I was thrilled about that. Rinoa's there. A bunch of other characters that, big time fans are a fan over there. And I think that's good for old time fans and new fans as well. But specifically about the characters, I am very, very happy that they are actually adding voice acting, because I think that that's going to kind of give the game not necessarily a premium feel, but it's going to feel better than just kind of like your typical mobile game, right?
Yeah, because even Ever Crisis, it's pretty much unvoiced. Like, you get some battle cries, and that's about it.
Right, and there's, one or two CGI cutscenes that get voiced here and there, but beyond that, it's not voiced.
My last negative will just be, I just feel like Final Fantasy should get a guaranteed dub, no matter what it is, when it comes out over here. And I feel like that's really important to breaking into foreign markets, because I feel like anime's exploded so hard because of how much the dubbing industry has broadened.
Yeah.
So I do feel like that's a minor misstep, but the Japanese voice actors are all amazing, and I love hearing those voices, and really, it makes sense if they're wearing Japanese fashion clothes in Tokyo, in the real world, and they're trying to blend in or whatever, if that's part of the plot. So it makes sense, and I still enjoy it, and you're completely right. Because so many people I feel like can't get as invested in a story without hearing something. Because we at least have a bunch of people that still watch like subbed anime, and even people who watch things dubbed or buy games that are dubbed will occasionally pick up something like an Atelier or be like, I don't want to wait on One Piece to get dubbed, you know?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't watch any English dub, but beyond the point.
Not
beyond the point.
everyone can have such a big brain, though.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, again, I will say, with this kind of stuff, one element of the game that I do think is in the right direction as well is we kind of saw teases for some kind of like slice of life elements. Like there was a picture of, lightning ordering at a fast food restaurant, which I think is like so random. But I do think that that's going to give players kind of a way to connect with these characters beyond how we know them in their games. So I'm looking forward to that, at least as a fan of FF13 and such. But I'm definitely interested of how extensive that is. Is that going to be just a couple scenes, or is that going to be a big focus of the game with a lot to explore with each character?
I feel like that's what they really need to dive into. And if we even just look back at Opera Omnia, I'll give them this, even though it's out of service, and I do think it could have been turned into an offline version somehow, some way. That game had an extensive storyline that lasted the entire run. Like, they managed to wrap it up and before the end of service and everything, and it had a bunch of extra scenes of just fan service of all these characters talking. And like, this game had like every Final Fantasy character just about, from like spin-offs and whatever you can imagine, side characters. So it did really good with that. And that gives me good hopes for this, because if they can really nail having a bunch of this slice of life and like actually expanding or integrating into the plot, if we get rich side and main material, I think this will be like a golden like mobile game for me.
Definitely. I mean, that's what I look for in these games. Like with Ever Crisis, it's been the first soldier storyline. So I'm hopeful, and also kind of the events of just the main cast messing around. But I'm hopeful that there's going to be some quality, narrative here to explore and at least, enjoy. So we'll have to see what happens there. I also want to give a shout out to the outfits. There's definitely a few that I'm kind of indifferent on, but overall, as we've stated multiple times throughout this discussion, very big fan of the vibe they're going for. I'm just really happy to see a lot of these characters not wearing their traditional outfits. I think that's fun and interesting. And I'm personally really curious to see what other characters look like once they get added in.
Yeah, like, I really hope they get a pretty large cast. Like, I'm hoping it's more than just some of the bigger characters. It gives me hope because they have Gaia from FF14. I believe that's her name.
Yeah,
I'm not far enough in FF14, but I know she's not like a huge, major, super integral character to the plot. She might be involved in some of the raid or extra stuff. I'm not quite sure, so don't quote me on that. But the point being, she's not one of the main characters that's in the Scions of the Seventh Dawn or anything. And we're also getting Cryo from FF5.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think it's a
nice.
good cast so far. I'm happy with it. I like the niche pulls for sure.
So if we really, I hope we get at minimum at least 5 characters per entry. At minimum.
Yeah.
And some spin-offs. Like, if
No,
we can
that'd
get
be
a nice
great.
roster, that's what makes a Dissidia.
For sure.
And
We'll
with
have
the
to see.
outfits, dude, I think some of the main issues some people might have brought up online, like, I know you feel a little iffy on some of them. I think some of it just comes from, they have like another artist that I think the Nomura crediting might just come from like original character design or some supervision.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not 100% sure because it's a rather vague crediting, to be fair. They both worked on these arts, but I'm guessing it's just like the softer, we're talking about it has like a softer, more anime style, so that just kind of means some things are getting simplified. So I just feel like some of the clothes are a little on the basic side in a couple areas. Like, I really love Payne, like how they portrayed him with like his like fedora covering half of his face like his helmet does. That's awesome, but then I feel like some of his clothes are just on a little bit of the basic side in terms of like detail. is what I specifically mean. We're not getting like the classic Nomura layering or belts on every character.
Yeah. Mine that I was like, oh man, was Renoa. Like, Final Fantasy VIII is like one of my favorite Final Fantasies, and I was like so excited to see her because, of course, Square Enix only has one pose to give her, and it's the pointing one. So we knew it was her. And I'm like, okay, what's her design going to be? Because clearly this is not, traditional designs, but it's very, very, very similar to her original design, which, like, I love her original design. I think
And
the new one's good,
yeah,
but I'm
8
like,
is
I would have liked a little
semi-modern.
more crazy. Yeah,
That has me hoping that they just have a lot more outfits throughout the course of this game. Like
definitely.
give us some holiday and seasonal outfits. Give us alternate colors. Just give us brand new fits. Like, oh, every year they get like a new main outfit or something even. Like maybe not on that scale, but you know what I mean. They just kind of need to go crazy. And the thing is, I'm loving the vibe of the game. I think there's a skeleton here to provide a great mobile game because you can look at things like Grand Blue Fantasy, and that game has a huge player base. So does Fate. Some of these gacha games have huge player bases, and I think Final Fantasy could at least find its way into like that moderate space of where it's still pretty popular, but maybe not permeate that upper echelon. And that all rides on, I feel like they need a lot of content. We need a lot of these slice of life scenes. We need a good story that's involved with a lot of chapters that's regularly updated.
We
Like
do.
it needs consistent content.
I agree. And I mean, I feel like in this release in particular, launch is so important for that reason. There needs to be a plethora of content at launch to keep people engaged, and also a clear roadmap of when new content is coming and how substantial it's going to be. Because if they can do that, I do think that they're going to be able to grab in players and new players as well and keep them on the hook for a little bit. At least I would say 3 to 6 months. But they're really going to have to make sure that this launches with, a lot to do.
And even beyond just having a lot of content, for me personally, there's even because I love a few gacha games. I've been doing good about keeping up with Ever Crisis the past little while here, and the thing is, it just gets tiring doing the exact same thing all the time. So I'd love to see a little bit of content variety, because I feel like because that's another thing with the 3v3 battles is I feel like if that's the only thing, or if they're only done in one way, it could get boring. So I hope they offer some like remixes to it, even if they stick with the 3v3 like competitive monster slaying deal. I feel like maybe having side objectives or like a different mode that presents it differently and other things like that, especially for events, is key.
For sure. No, I couldn't agree more. And again, it's anyone's guess of what's going to happen. But as kind of a, light cadence to the end of this, it is interesting that, the last Dissidia game came out and then NT dropped just a year later.
Yep. Because original Dissidia, that was like 2007 or 8 on the PSP. And then, in 2011, we got Dissidia 012 Duodecim, which completely reworked the original Dissidia along with adding a lot of extra story elements and new characters. So that was great. But then Dissidia kind of didn't get much for a while, 4 years. And then Dissidia Arcade came out only in Japan. I remember being quite jealous. And then it took 3 years before we got anything else from Dissidia in America. So that's like a 6-year gap for like the entire world. And it was a mobile game, Dissidia Opera Omnia, and it has a lot of good points, but it was still not what we wanted. But what's funny about that, Opera Omnia came out in America late, so Opera Omnia and NT dropped like the same month over here.
Yep.
Like they came out really close. So there's almost a part of me that wants to, because it's not a bad strategy necessarily to have a mobile game run alongside or help advertise the next game. That's kind of the point of releasing something to expand your consumer base. And the time to do that is when the iron's hot, which is typically, within like a year of that releasing. So a part of me just wants to hope that's that's the big picture, but we can't really say for certain.
We cannot. At the end of the day, Dissidia is back whether you like it or not in the form of Dissidia Duellum, and we have to embrace that. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how people react to the closed beta test when that comes out, and if I think next month or the month after. But the game's coming out next year, so I'm sure we'll be hearing more soon. Any closing thoughts, Payne?
I'd say at the end of the day, I'm still pretty excited. This is gonna sound weird, but sometimes I kind of hate playing like phone games when they make you play in landscape, just because I don't find it to always be convenient to just play like a few minutes, like in public on your phone, just always holding your phone in landscape. I feel like I could drop it at any moment.
Oh, I mean,
so
super fair.
having a nice, just looking Final Fantasy game with some 3D action is kind of what I've been craving on mobile. So it fits a weird niche, because I've enjoyed games like Dragalia Lost in the past. So having something like that is filling a weird niche for me. And I'm also just really in love with the concept of them being isekai to the real world. Because I believe Dissidia is at its best when it delivers good fan service. Because why else are you doing a crossover if you're not going to have like a story that lets these characters from completely different universes just kind of chill and have fun in some ways.
Totally agree.
And the rest of Dissidia doesn't have it on quite the same level as we're in a coffee shop, Lightning's buying a burger from McDonald's. Cloud and Terra bumped into each other at the arcade after school or something. I don't know. Like, there's so much you can do with this, because especially in Dissidia Duodecim, it's pretty dark throughout that game. The story of it is they're trapped in a cycle with fractured memories. Like, there's some cycles where Cloud's technically on the villain side, and most of the game takes place in the final cycle where you break it and defeat Chaos. And most of the character interactions is, them working through problems and issues and having drama. And it's interesting to see Dissidia take
and
this
you've just
lighter
made me
tone.
realize that we need Jack Garland in this game.
Put Jack in. He's already dressed for the occasion like Noctis. And you need to, assume they're going to want to shoot for more of an E10/T type rating, you know. Have him say...
It's alright, he could just say chaos.
Have him say bullcrap. Or dang it.
That works for me. But at the end of the day, guys, that's going to wrap it for this Dissidia Duellum discussion of our initial thoughts. Be sure to let us know down below what you thought of this reveal from Square Enix, whether you're excited for the game or whether you're just not interested at all. We're always very excited to hear what you all have to say. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching, and be sure to keep it right here at Final Weapon for all things Final Fantasy.